Hello everyone, welcome to the video, and today we're going to be talking about my Gley build, which in my opinion is probably one of the best Gley builds in the entire game. I know I'm a little bit late to Gley, but I do all of this stuff for myself, and as you can see by the title and on screen right here, I didn't 100% solo the Gluttony, but like I said, I'm a solo player. I can't really set it up so that no one does damage, but I did 112 million damage out of its 148 possible. And this was without a completed build, so I could have done even more damage, and honestly if I had 3 Valbies just focusing on getting the boss out of the enraged phase and making sure his insta-kill doesn't proc so that they can prolong the fight, I probably would have been able to do all the damage by myself and around the same time because, like I said, the build I used was not 100% ideal. I also threw in a couple punching bag kills. With my Massacre, I was able to kill him in about 6 seconds, and with the gun build, I was able to kill him in about 7 seconds. The Massacre build, in my opinion, is a little bit better for solo play, and the reason for that is because Massacre charges up the enraged meter of bosses by a lot, and some people can be a little bit irritated by that. But now we're going to get into the first build, which is the Massacre Build. And like I said, this is the go-to for solo play. The first thing we're going to be looking at is the modules, and the first module we're going to be talking about is Skill Simplification and Focus on Dimension. Skill Simplification is better than Focus on Dimension, but when you take out Focus on Dimension, you're losing a little bit of cooldown, and when you lose that little bit of cooldown, you will not have 100% uptime on your infinite ammo, which means you'll have to find that cooldown and duration from other places. One of those things you're going to find it from is Maximize Duration. This module, however, will reduce your skill power modifier by 20%, and it just ends up not really being worth it because you're losing 20% skill power modifier there. And another thing you'll have to do is change your reactor. You'll have to have a reactor that has skill cooldown and duration on it. And I've even seen some people with builds that use the Annihilation set instead of the Slayer set so they can get that. And that just ends up not being worth it at all. That's why I think it's actually just a lot better to use Focus on Dimension instead of getting the little bit extra damage from Skill Simplification. And I did the math and it was only about 20,000 damage I was missing out on. And I'm pretty sure if you ended up making all of those changes to get the required 100% uptime, you'd be losing way more than what it's worth. And as for the rest of the modules, we're using Spear and Shield, mostly for the skill power. Focus on non-attribute, then we have more duration, more cooldown, more duration, more cooldown, and Walk a Tightrope. This is best in slot because you're getting skill power modifier and firearm attack, which is great. We're also using an outstanding investment. This gives us 100% uptime, and it's just overall a lot better than maximized duration because you're not losing that 20% skill damage. And if you wanted a little bit more HP, you can take out Battle of Stamina and throw in Stim Accelerant, and this would bring your stats to about 17,000 HP and 20,000 defense. For our Python stats, we're using Fire Attack, bonus damage versus Colossus, weak point damage, and firearm attack. The element is optional. You can use fire attack or electric attack. Those are the 2 best elements in the game currently. Poison, I know it works better with the Python, but poison is literally terrible in this game, and it's just because there's no Colossus that's really weak to it that's worth killing. These are the modules that I'm going to be using. The 4 most important ones are Fire Rate, Fire Priority, Fire Enhancement, and Sharp Precision Shot. Those are going to be the ones that do the most amount of damage. With the way Massacre works, your firearm attack doesn't matter too much, but the elements and the fire rate are very, very important to have. Obviously, like weak point damage, they all help, but it's not like a crazy difference overall just because of the way that Massacre works. For our reactor, we have a non-attribute dimensional reactor, Python mounting obviously, and the substats, cooldown and damage versus Colossus, those are best in slot. And for our external components, we are using the Slayer set, which for Massacre builds is absolutely, without a doubt, best in slot. I also want to take this time to talk about how Massacre works because there's a lot of confusion in the community and I feel like a lot of people have it wrong. And I also want to mention that Gley in general is probably the one Descendant that takes the longest time to not only get off the ground, but to get a perfect build because you will need 2 100% maxed out weapons, as well as 2 different external component sets. Now I want to talk about how Massacre works, and it's kind of complicated, but the simplest way I can explain this is that every single bullet has a base damage modifier, which is your skill power, added on top of it. And for that reason, stacking as much skill power as you can get, so that that base number that's added to each bullet goes as high as you can get it, as well as having a weapon that has the most possible fire rate without sacrificing too much damage. There is a submachine gun in the game that has a faster fire rate than the Python, And in theory this is better, but in order to use it, because it's a purple weapon, you would have to also use a purple reactor, and you'd be losing on 20% skill power that way, so it just makes it not worth it. And that's why fire rate is so important on the Massacre build, because as fast as you can shoot, you are getting all that damage from your skill power on each bullet. That's why focusing on firearm attack just isn't as important. Obviously it makes a difference, but that's why the Annihilation set doesn't even come close to the Slayer set in terms of the Massacre builds. And obviously I have on screen my Gluttony kill. And again, this Gluttony kill was done completely solo. Like, these are just random people that I found. And I definitely could have done it faster if I had my optimized build. But 112 million damage is absolutely crazy. And these two builds are going to carry you through solo play. So if you're like me and you play by yourself, this is going to be the build for you. And I also quickly want to talk about how you can use the Massacre build in team play without completely filling up the enraged meter of the boss. And if you guys were not familiar, the enraged meter cannot be filled up if there is a person that is hanging on to one of the Colossus breakable parts. So if you make one of the shoulders of a Colossus, for example, turn golden, and someone jumps on the arm, and then they just hold both triggers or both mouse buttons and they just stay there. Every single bullet or anything that goes into this boss at this point is not going to fill up his enraged meter. And that's when you're just going to go crazy with the Massacre. So obviously there is a level of communication and coordination that is required in order to be able to do this, but I've found that in a lot of solo play, there's people that just know this and do this without even having to be told or anything. So that's when you're going to be wanting to do as much damage as you can, and obviously you're never really going to want to not be shooting with the Massacre build because you have that 100% uptime. But whenever someone's hanging on a Colossus part, that's definitely when you want to go as crazy as you can, as well as whenever the Colossus is stunned, that also does not fill up his enraged meter. So those are like the two times where you're going to want to do as much damage as possible. And also, if you are playing with a Gley and they're using Massacre, keep that in mind because you can be helping yourself out as well as them. So that's just a tip that's like really important to know, especially if you're using the Massacre builds for all types of content. And I also want to mention another thing, and that's just build diversity. Currently, because of the way catalysts work, a lot of builds are going to be very similar, especially when you make the best builds or one of the best builds. Obviously, because I'm so late to Gley, this build probably already exists. There's probably some freak on Gley who has like everything maxed out. He's been playing her since the game came out, and he already figured all of this out. But a lot of times people will mess up like one small thing that's like you can min-max a little bit better, and that's why I'm here. I just try to make the best builds for everything that I come across, and that's where we are here. So this is my gun Gley builds, and you don't need Predator Instinct. It's like not a crazy amount of damage. You can go Blood and Iron, you can go Massive Sanguification. It really does not matter a whole lot. But then we have Shield Conversion. This just gives us a little bit more defense. This is not even necessary. It gives you 6% more defense than just the regular increased defense mod. So it's like, not, if you don't have it, don't really worry about it too much, because that 6%, it really means nothing. But because it does give a little bit more, obviously, if you want the best build, you're going to want that. And then we have Focus on Non-Attribute. This doesn't really matter. It's just here for the cooldown. Then we have Skill Extension, more duration, more cooldown, Stim Accelerant for the maximum amount of HP, cooldown, Walk a Tightrope, and we have Maximized Duration here. Before I didn't want it, but now that we don't use skill power modifier, I do want it because I want the maximum amount, and we don't need skill power, so that's why we obviously swapped to shield conversion instead of spear and shield. And that's going to give us our 100% uptime, and we have shot focus as well. And then for our HP build, this is more tanky. We obviously take out shot focus and just throw in another HP mod, and that'll give us 20,000 HP with 42,000 defense, which is more than enough for all types of content in the game. And then for our reactor, the reactor doesn't matter a whole lot. You just want the substats. The substats are the most important ones. You could literally use a fire reactor if you wanted. It really doesn't matter. You just want something with cooldown and duration. You could also do cooldown and skill cost. It really doesn't matter. Then we're using the 4-piece Annihilation set. If you want to know the substats, just pause the video. I have a literal perfect set of the Annihilation set. We are using Greg's Reverse Fate. We have firearm attack, damage versus Colossus, crit hit rate, and crit hit damage. I have crit hit rate because I'm also using this weapon on my Valby Supply Moisture build, but I think that weak point damage would be a little bit better. Here is my Greg's Reverse Fate builds. It is pretty standard. Obviously, like I said, there's going to be overlap in a lot of builds because there is only one best build, and if anything looks similar, that's just the way it is until they change the way catalysts work. That's just how certain things are going to be for a while. I really, really hope they change that in the coming updates because there's really not a whole lot of build diversity, which sucks. I feel like it's stopping people from getting really creative with builds and having some really spectacular builds. I am also going to quickly show the damage on the screen, because if we hit a weak point crit, we are doing 900,000 damage per shot, which is absolutely absurd. And that is just Greg's at its best. With this Gley build, the damage is crazy. And obviously, if you hit a weak point crit, all of those meteors that come down are all going to be that 900k, which is what we want. But that's pretty much it for today's video. So if you guys found this video helpful, make sure to drop that like, as well as sub to the channel. Help me out a lot, and I would really, really appreciate it. But again, that's it for me. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.